All right, episode 3 of Dan Mathews and the Animals. He is one of the animals. He is Matt Maltepis. I am the Dan Mathews part of the show. And Matt, college football week 1 is in the books. I mean, pretty much a mixed bag across the board. I know we didn't touch the Colorado and TCU game, but that was an interesting one. The largest upset of the weekend goes to Texas State as they go to Waco and beat Baylor 42-31. They were a plus 1,400 road dog in this one. And then, of course, one of the games we are going to talk about Clemson. But there is a good Twitter account on X, I guess, a good X account, I guess is what we could call it, called Odds and Picks. And they did a really good job, Matt, of the summary of the weekend. The underdogs across the board, not a great play. 9-78 versus the money line. The favorites, 40-47 against the spread. Overs were 46-41. So let's just jump off right there before we recap the games. Even with the new clock changes in college football, the overs in most of the game was still the play, although it looked like earlier in the week that was not necessarily going to be the case.
Yeah, we'll see how this progresses. Obviously, new clock rules, they lean towards the under, right? It leans towards like lower scoring games. Not necessarily unders, depends on the number, but lower scoring games. I mean, but it's still early. It's only 1 week in, it's a long season. So we'll see how that goes. And on top of that, one thing you got to keep in mind is as the season goes, winds pick up, weather changes. So we'll keep an eye on everything.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get right into it. As this one being the recap pod, is we will get into the weekend that is coming up later on this week. But let's start first with the game of the weekend. At least for the Noles, it was. I know LSU fans definitely want to forget about this one, but Florida State was a trending team heading into this one. This opened at 3. And it got all the way down to, I think at one point on Sunday, I saw, Matt, that it got down to 1.5. Moral of the story is the Noles covered this number. I think it finally settled at 2, and they crushed that number even with getting the points in this one.
Yeah, I mean, right from the gate, we had turnover rundowns by LSU, right? And then as the game kept on progressing, you had another turnover rundowns, and you kept on having different mistakes, whether it was a punt return, fumble. It was the little things in this game. Like the end of the first half was 17-14, and LSU actually won that first half, like in the box score. They should have been up probably another score or so. So it probably should have been 24-14. But the problem is in the second half, Kelly got out coached big time. He was running the ball in moments. I'm looking at the game and I'm like, sorry about that. I'm looking at the game. I'm like, what are you doing? Your team is down. You're running the ball. You're wasting your time, your clock. The clock right now is not your friend. So it was a multitude of different mistakes in this game. And LSU suffered the consequences. I mean, 24-45, Florida State blew the doors and blew the windows off this team. We look at a third down conversion rate for LSU, 3 of 10. You want to know what Florida State was? 9 of 14. Huge discrepancy. Not only that, but you look at LSU 0-3 and 4th down conversion. You combine that with their fumble and interception, well, that's 5 turnovers. You look at FSU, they were 1 of 1 on 4th down, so no turnovers there, and they had an interception. So you have basically 5 turnovers to 1. Of course you're going to lose the game. Of course you're going to get outscored. Of course, like anytime you lose the turnover battle by 1 turnover, you usually don't cover the game, you don't win it. You lose it 5-1. Well, you're just shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, and that's what they did all night. I mean, it was not only that, it was also, too, you talked about a discrepancy. The line play for both the offensive and defensive line of LSU, which with Mason Smith out there or not with the Mason Smith, which, of course, for this one they didn't because of the suspension, that was a huge difference in this game. And then you also saw LSU, you touched on it, turnover on downs to start off the night, and then another one too near midfield on a 4th and 1 of them going out of the gun, which I wasn't necessarily sure why they were doing that, but still unable to convert that. And then you factor in the turnovers to another special teams blunder of what we saw last year with Malik Neighbors back there returning kicks. I know that Aaron Anderson was a guy that they got this year in the transfer portal that people were very excited about what he could bring from the return game. And finally, Brian Kelly, when it got to that on punts, said, I'm not doing this again this year. We're just going to go punt safe and we'll just have fair catches for the rest of the game. But it didn't matter. I mean, this was a team that, you're exactly right, outplayed, outcoached in that second half. Hats off to Mike Norvell and his team, because this is what Florida State fans have been building for some time. And we'll get into another game out of the ACC here in just a second. But all of a sudden, you look at Florida State and you say, maybe they might just be that team. Jock Peterson said it a few years ago with the Braves during the World Series run. We are those MFers. Maybe Florida State are those guys this year.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see with Florida State. Obviously, they might be those guys. They took down this LSU team, and a lot of sharp action was on LSU to win the championship, including us, the college kids. And, we're in a tough spot now, but they just outplayed them in so many aspects in line play. You look at the sack discrepancy, LSU 0. You looked at FSU, they're getting to the quarterback, Jaden Daniels, right? You look at the turnover battle, you look at the mistakes, little stuff. Like, they were sharp. This team was sharp. They're well coached. There's a big difference. So we'll see how it progresses.
Yeah, definitely. So Florida State taking this one by 21. It was just an absolute dominating performance by Mike Norvell and his team. And I think we can agree the early season, at least Heisman favoritism, probably going to go in a huge way towards Jordan Travis for the way that he played in this one. But the Noles able to absolutely capture week one. It was a game that I know that, there were a lot of people out there who thought that they could win this game. I don't think that they saw it coming down the way that it did, but FSU able to win this one in a huge way, 45-24 to start off the season in week one. Let's bounce over before we get to the last ACC game that we had for this one, because another one too that I don't think a lot of people necessarily saw going this way, myself, you included, and that is Mac Brown's North Carolina Tar Heels absolutely dominating South Carolina in this one, beating them 31-17. I mean, this was 1-2. We took 2 plays on this one, and the 2 plays didn't work because I think in a way we thought that South Carolina was going to be what North Carolina was on Saturday night, and that is being able to have enough defense to North Carolina not having enough. But it was South Carolina not having any answers offensively to North Carolina looking much improved defensively.
Yeah, UNC was over 60% on third down compared to South Carolina's 29% on third down conversion rate. That made all the difference because not only could they not convert on third down, but South Carolina then felt forced to go for it on fourth down. We saw that on the first drive of the second half. The score was 17-14, just like the LSU game. Very close game, right? 3-point game. They were at the 47. They didn't have to go for it, but they did, and UNC stopped them. And that's where this game ultimately, it changed. The momentum changed. Everything changed. UNC took advantage. They went and took that 10-point lead, and they never looked back. South Carolina went for a couple more times late on in the game, 4th and long, didn't convert on fourth down the whole game. Big 0 and 4, which is that's 4 basically turnovers, missed points. South Carolina's ground game, non-existent. UNC literally held them to -2 yards rushing, which is insane. They control the game, UNC, on the ground themselves with 170 yards rushing. And even though South Carolina, they snagged 2 interceptions against Drake May, they couldn't capitalize. It was that simple. They were given a plethora of chances in the second half, especially in the game, but they just were not built for the task. We always talk about the turnover battle. Talked about it last game. You win the turnover battle, you win the game more than not, and you cover the spread more than not. And this game was close at halftime, almost even, 17-14. South Carolina had their chances, like I said, but all 4 turnover and downs came on in the second half, late in the game. Rattler didn't necessarily play bad. I mean, he was 30 of 39, 350 yards, 9 yards per pass. That's not that bad. The problem was he had no help on the ground game. He had no help on the O-line. They gave up 9 sacks. UNC had 9 sacks in that game. I mean, in all of 22, how many did they have? Around 17. So yeah, it was definitely Rattler didn't have any help in this game. What I came away with this game was how impressive the D line was for UNC. 9 sacks, and then on top of that, held the other team to -2 yards rushing. You got to watch out for this UNC D line. They're mean.
Yeah, and they also too are the leaders in sack totals so far through this part of the season. The next closest are SMU and Marshall at 7 through one game, and then you've got 6 from USC. They've gotten to play 2 games so far this season. North Carolina last year, as you pointed out, the sack totals that they had all total last season. They were towards the bottom, 17. You're exactly
Yeah,
right.
17.
120th out of 131 FBS teams last year.
Look at that
So
change.
that's it. That's it. So overnight, the Gene Chizik experience is starting to work there at North Carolina. So we took an over on this one. The over did not hit, which we thought with both defenses that could mean plenty of points, especially the quarterback play that you had in this one. And then also to South Carolina, just it just seemed like the momentum from last year's team, and you get players like Spence Rattler back and DeCarrion Joyner back from last year's team. But obviously, I mean, you had an offensive coordinator change. There were a lot of people who were not huge fans of the Dow Loggins hire, and I know that Shane Beamer was definitely trying to do his best to be able to defend said hire when they made it earlier in the offseason. But now I think a lot of South Carolina fans are growing even louder about their displeasure of the Dow Loggins hire. And after the game, too, I know that Shane Beamer really upset some people of saying, really, you're going to blame the Chain Gang for how this game went? No, man, you just got your ass kicked in this game. So just take the L and move along. And that's what South Carolina did in this one. Another one that was a surprise of the weekend. I mean, like I said, we didn't cover the Colorado TCU game. That was an unreal game. But
Unreal.
how about Clemson? I mean, I think that probably we were expecting offensive improvement. At least, we talked about in the last episode, Matt, we talked about that receiver was going to be an issue for them. Boy, that showed. And you also found out that aside from Will Shipley and Phil Maffa, what else do you necessarily have on offense? I mean, I think new coordinator change or not, Dabo Sweeney is kind of looking to a point where it's like, man, what do I need to do to get this thing in the right direction?
Yeah, Clemson, I like to start off on the third down, fourth downs especially because turnovers on downs. Clemson 0-2 on fourth down. Duke 101. And then on top of those two turnover on downs for Clemson, they had an interception. On top of that interception, they had 2 fumbles. On top of that, they had the 2 blocked field goals, right? So nothing went right for the Clemson team. Clemson was lucky Duke fumbled actually one of their punt returns, which gave them an easy score. That was, I think, right before half. Riley Leonard was driving down the field with the Duke Blue Devils, and I think they fumbled, which kept them from scoring. So then Clemson got lucky again, keep them in the game. There was just a lot of bonehead plays. Once again, it's like some teams just came out rusty this year. First game of the season came out making these stupid bonehead plays. Clemson, perfect example. Riley Leonard didn't have to do much. 17 of 33, 175 yards about, but he didn't turn over the ball, right? You don't turn over the ball, you keep yourself in the game. And what they did was instead of going out there and trying to win the game, what the Blue Devils did was they said, okay, Clemson, we're going to see if you're going to lose it, and then we'll take advantage, right? We'll see. It's like in boxing, right? You wait for the other person to make a mistake, then you hit him with the counter. And that's all Duke did. Clemson shot themselves in the foot. They lost the game themselves, literally 17 to 33. Leonard didn't have to do much, 175 yards. But Blue Devils took advantage when they saw the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it was a game where they lost the turnover battle, as you talked about, 3-2. I mean, I know that Duke had that muff punt that set up Clemson for their lone score of the night. But I mean, aside from that, I mean, third down efficiency, 7 of 15 to Duke's 5 of 15. 0 for 2 on those fourth downs, too, as well, that you pointed to. And then, Klubnik, I know a lot of people are going to come to him and say, oh, well, horrible performance by him. But my question is, I mean, exactly what I talked about. I mean, Antonio Williams with 7 catches, Bo Collins, it was also, hearing about this Clemson offensive line all of this offseason and how improved they were and how this was going to be one of the best groups. That was a group that lost the battle up front. I mean, I was seeing a guy in Klubnik that really just did not have his chance to go through his progressions. And I think that for the most part, some of the throws he made, they were really good throws. I mean, he had some drops as well. I mean, I'm trying to remember who he threw it to. I can't remember if it was Collins or who it was at the sidelines. It was an NFL level throw that just went through the receiver's hands. And
Yeah.
I was just like, you're going to put this on number two? This isn't on
No,
number two.
it was a team
But
effort.
yeah, no, absolutely. And the final thing about this too is I was thinking about this on the drive in today before joining you, Matt. And I understand what Dabo Sweeney's, thought process is with the transfer portal. I understand what it is in terms of building up a team. You saw the team who is right now the team to beat in the ACC in Florida State just absolutely dominate with not only line play, which is what Clemson had in the past, but also superior wide receiver talent. That I
Mhm.
think, if nothing else, this needs to be a swallow your pride moment for Dabo Sweeney this next off season. He needs to go to every single donor that he can and say, let's make this the destination for wide receivers because we used to have that. Now we don't. And I understand that the clip is making its rounds right now on social media of Klubnik coming off the field. I think that's more of just a heat of the moment thing. I don't think there's anything necessarily there. But when you get a quarterback who kind of feels like he's not very well supported and he's frustrated like that, it only takes a few more times for him to say, maybe this isn't the right place for me. And he ends up somewhere else because what they're doing offensively right now, in the words they say down here in the South, it ain't it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely concerning. I mean, it's like in any sport. Eventually, you get tired of it, right? You get tired of carrying everyone, and then the blame is always put on you when you're the leader,
Mhm.
even though you know it's not your fault. So, of course, that's something you definitely have to worry about and keep an eye on. And yeah, he has to swallow his pride, man. And you got to go out and get the talent because, I mean, you can only go so far. You need the guys. You need the potential. Now, whether that talent, turns into execution is a different story, but yeah, definitely you hit it right on the nose.
So 1-3 over the weekend. So there's room to grow there, but 2-1 in the early action that we had of Florida and Utah, as well as we didn't get the Friday night game of Louisville and Georgia Tech thanks to a garbage time touchdown by Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
But there was a game too that it looked like Louisville that they might have gotten surprised a little bit, and they were able to make a run there in the second half come back to win that one. And then we got the Nebraska Minnesota as well in that one, as we had the under in that one, and that was a good under to play. But
Florida,
we'll still
Utah.
have. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say Florida, Utah under first half, full game.
Right.
I think we went over that one in the first episode as well. So
Yeah. No, definitely. So, still a lot of good action to come this season with us here on Dan Mathews and the Animals. Like I've said too before, when you're watching this video, like and subscribe, tell your friends about it, as we will be with you every Tuesday and Thursday throughout the college football season. We will get you set up for the weekend action on Thursday. Quick little recap here of the weekend that was on the show. As Matt, I mean, I threw out the numbers. I mean, week one can usually be a little bit of a wild card. Week 2 and 3, that's when you kind of start to find out who your team is. So we will see how the action goes as the weekends go along. But all in all, though, the season has started and we are in the play. So we will definitely come back at it on Thursday and get you ready for the weekend that will be. I'm Dan Mathews. He's Matt Maltepis. This
one
is Dan Mathews and the Animals. You got one more thing?
one more thing to say. Notre Dame over 51. Lock it in. We'll talk about it more on the next show.
I love it. I love it. He is already giving you plays to think about before we come back to you on Thursday. That's episode 3. It's in the books. Talk to y'all later.